I'm not posting this to be edgy or to brag. I'm posting it because it still rattles around in my head at 3 a.m., and if I don't get it out somewhere, I'm pretty sure it's going to rot me from the inside. This happened years ago. Long enough that the panic has dulled, but not long enough that I've forgiven myself. Back then, my name was still clean. Or at least clean enough. I was William, late 30s, small-time landlord, recently divorced, drowning in a mortgage I shouldn't have taken and a business I didn't know how to save. The building was old, always leaking, always one repair away from another inspection. Insurance was the only thing about it that felt solid, monthly payments going out like clockwork, a promise sitting there on paper saying if everything goes wrong, you won't be ruined. That's the lie I told myself first, that things had already gone wrong, and I was just fast-forwarding to the inevitable. I didn't wake up one day thinking, I'm going to commit arson. It came slower than that. A conversation with an adjuster. A late-night beer while staring at spreadsheets. A passing joke from a friend about how fires fix everything. Each thought landed softly, like snow, until suddenly the weight was enough to collapse the roof in my head. I convinced myself it was victimless. No tenants. No one inside. Just a structure and a policy number. I told myself the fire would be small. Controlled. A clean loss, wrapped in paperwork and sympathy. I was wrong about almost every part of that, but at the time, I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that I was tired, scared, and desperate enough to believe I could choreograph destruction and walk away untouched. What scares me looking back is how normal everything felt while I was lining things up. I never wrote anything down. Never Googled anything obvious. In my head, that meant I wasn't really planning a crime. I was just thinking through scenarios. The same way anyone does when they're in trouble and looking for exits. I told myself rules. That was the first step. No accelerants lying around. No obvious tampering. Nothing that screamed intent if someone went digging later. I wanted it to look like one of those boring, tragic accidents people shake their heads at before flipping the page. Old wiring. Neglect. Bad luck. Those words felt like armor. I walked through the building more than usual. Too much, probably. I'd stand there with my hands in my pockets, staring at the walls, listening to the hum of nothing. I memorized how it smelled, how the air sat heavy in certain rooms. I kept telling myself I was just being thorough, like a responsible owner doing a final check before selling or renovating. I timed things. Not in a stopwatch way, more like a vibe. When the street was quiet. When nearby businesses closed. When no one would ask why my car was parked there a little longer than normal. I practiced casual in the mirror, because God forbid anyone remember me acting strange. The most disturbing part. How calm I felt. Not excited. Not panicked. Just focused. Like I'd finally picked a direction after months of spinning. I slept better during that week than I had in months, and that realization still makes my stomach turn. I kept telling myself, once this is done, everything resets. Dead gone. Stress gone. Me, back to being a decent person who just survived a rough patch. I didn't think of it as crossing a line, I thought of it as stepping over a crack in the sidewalk. That's the thing about bad decisions. They rarely announce themselves. They let you rehearse them until they feel ordinary. The night itself didn't feel dramatic. No thunder, no cinematic rain. Just one of those flat, forgettable evenings where the sky looks like it gave up trying. I remember thinking that was perfect. Forgettable nights don't get remembered. I parked farther away than usual and walked the rest of the distance, keys cold in my hand. Every step felt louder than it should have been, like the pavement was tattling on me. I kept expecting someone to call my name, to ask what I was doing out so late, but the street stayed empty and indifferent. Inside, the building felt different. Not haunted, just aware. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears. I moved slowly, telling myself I was double-checking things, even though I knew exactly why I was there. My heart wasn't racing yet. That came later. At that moment, it was a steady, heavy thump, like it was waiting for permission to panic. I hesitated longer than I want to admit. Standing there, thinking about how easy it would be to leave. Lock the door. Go home. Wake up tomorrow and still be broke but still be me. Then I thought about the bills. The calls. The shame. And I stayed. This is the part one struggled to describe, because once I crossed that invisible line, everything sped up in my head while time itself seemed to drag. I didn't suddenly feel like a villain. I felt like an actor who'd missed his cue too many times and finally stepped onto the stage. I went through motions I'd rehearsed in my mind without ever labeling them as rehearsal. Simple things. Careless-looking things. The kind of mistakes old buildings are famous for. I kept my movements deliberate, almost gentle, like roughness might wake the place up and make it fight back. My hands shook more than I expected. Not uncontrollably, but enough that I had to pause and breathe through my nose, slow and steady. I remember thinking, this is it. After this, there's no undoing anything. That thought didn't stop me. It just made everything sharper. When it finally happened, there was no explosion, no instant chaos. Just a quiet, creeping sense of momentum, like a boulder starting to roll downhill. I stood there longer than I should have, watching the first signs that I'd set something irreversible in motion. That's when my heart started to race. Not from fear yet, but from the realization that it was working. I left when I thought I was supposed to. That was the plan. Don't linger, don't admire, don't panic. Just walk out like you forgot something inside and remembered too late. I locked the door behind me with hands that suddenly felt like they didn't belong to me. Halfway down the block I smelled it. Smoke doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it just sneaks up on you, thin and bitter, like a warning you're already ignoring. I told myself it was nothing. Old building, old smells. My brain was still trying to protect me from what I'd done. Then I heard it, glass popping. Not shattering, just that sharp tick sound, like the building clearing its throat. I stopped walking. That was my second mistake. I turned around and saw a glow where there absolutely should not have been one. Too bright. Too fast. The fire wasn't crawling the way I'd imagined. It was stretching, reaching, finding things I hadn't thought about. That's when fear finally arrived, full force, no filter. Not fear of getting caught, fear that I'd just unleashed something that didn't care about my plans, my debts, or my intentions. And it wasn't done growing. I wish I could say I ran. That instinct kicked in immediately and saved me from making things worse. But the truth is, I froze. I stood there like an idiot, staring at the glow as it climbed higher than it had any right to. It felt unreal, like watching a screen instead of something I'd actually caused. A car slowed as it passed me. The driver leaned forward, squinting, then sped up. That snapped something loose in my chest. Other people were noticing. Other people were about to get involved. This wasn't my quiet exit anymore. The fire alarms inside finally started screaming. That sound, metallic, desperate, cut straight through me. Windows cracked, one after another, like punctuation marks in a sentence I couldn't stop writing. Smoke poured out faster, darker, meaner than I'd imagined. I remember thinking, this is going to bring everyone. Firefighters. Police. Questions. I backed away, heart pounding so hard it hurt, forcing myself to look normal even though nothing about this was normal anymore. I kept my hands visible. Kept my pace steady. I told myself I was just another guy who happened to be nearby when something terrible started. Inside, though, I was unraveling. I wasn't scared of consequences yet. I was scared of how fast I'd lost control, and how little the fire cared that I was done with it. The sirens came quicker than I expected. They always do, I guess, when you're the reason they exist. The sound wrapped around the street, loud and urgent, bouncing off brick and asphalt until it felt like it was vibrating inside my ribs. I kept walking, counting steps in my head like that could keep me anchored to reality. People started to gather. A guy in a hoodie filming on his phone. A woman with her hand over her mouth, whispering, "Oh my God!" like it was a prayer. No one looked at me twice, and that somehow made it worse. I wanted someone to see me. To know. To stop me. A firefighter brushed past me, all purpose and momentum, smelling like sweat and smoke and focus. For half a second, I thought about grabbing him and confessing everything right there on the sidewalk. Just unloading it all and letting it end. Instead, I stepped aside like a polite bystander. I stood across the street as hoses uncoiled and commands were shouted. The building looked wounded now, flames licking out openly, no longer hiding. That was when guilt finally found its voice, not loud, not dramatic, just a low, steady pressure in my chest. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was real people risking themselves for something I'd broken on purpose. A cop eventually started talking to the crowd, asking the usual soft questions in a loud voice. Anyone see how it started? Anyone notice something strange earlier? The word strange felt like it was aimed directly at me. My mouth went dry. I did the bystander thing. Shrugged. Said I'd been walking home and smelled smoke. It came out steadier than I expected, which scared me more than if I'd stuttered. The officer nodded, already half distracted, scribbling something that probably meant nothing. That tiny mercy made my knees weak. Then I heard my name. One of the neighboring shop owners recognized me. Not accusing, just surprised. "Hey, William, isn't that your place?" His tone was almost sympathetic, like I was a victim standing among the rest of them. I nodded, and the world tilted. Suddenly there were more eyes on me. Questions layered on questions. Insurance? Tenants? Anyone inside? I answered automatically, sticking to facts that couldn't hurt me. Each word felt like walking a tightrope with gasoline-soaked shoes. I kept waiting for someone to see through me. To notice the way my hands wouldn't stop trembling. But no one did. That's when I realized how easy lying can become when the truth is too big to say out loud. They sent me home eventually. That phrase still feels absurd, like I was a kid who'd stayed out past curfew, not the reason a building was smoldering behind police tape. I walked away while flames were still chewing through the roof, my property reduced to something unrecognizable and loud. Sleep didn't happen. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard sirens again, saw that glow pushing against the dark. I kept checking my phone, convinced it would ring with bad news, someone hurt, something traced back to me, a mistake I'd missed finally surfacing. Morning made everything worse. Daylight stripped away the drama and left only damage. Photos were already circulating online. Comments from strangers dissecting the cause, the age of the building, the shame of neglectful owners. I read every word like I was studying for an exam on my own guilt. The insurance company called before noon. Calm. Professional. Sympathetic. They use phrases like, "unfortunate incident," and, "we'll take care of you." Each one landed like a punch. I thanked them. I hung up. Then I sat there, realizing the fire was over, but the waiting had just begun. The days that followed blurred together into a parade of forms, signatures, and practiced sadness. I learned quickly that grief is a language people expect you to speak when something burns down. You lower your voice. You sigh at the right moments. You say things like, "years of memories," even when what you're really mourning is lost leverage and bad investments. Inspectors walked me through the ruins, boots crunching over what used to be floors. They pointed, took photos, murmured to each other in codes I couldn't crack. Every time one of them paused too long, my heart jumped. I kept my hands jammed into my pockets, so no one could see them clench. I asked questions I already knew the answers to. I nodded like I was learning something new. Inside, I was screaming at myself to stop talking, to stop existing so loudly. At night, I rehearsed explanations for things no one had asked yet. Why I'd been nearby. Why the locks were the way they were. Why my answers sounded so polished. That was when paranoia replaced panic. Panic is sharp. Paranoia is patient. And it settled in like it planned to stay. It wasn't one big moment where everything almost fell apart. It was 100 tiny ones. A question asked twice. A pause that lasted a second too long. An email that ended with, "Just to clarify," instead of, "Thank you." Each one chipped at the version of events I'd been repeating until it started to feel brittle. An insurance investigator came by again, this time less friendly. Still polite, but sharper around the edges. He asked me to walk him through the timeline. I did. I told it enough times that it flowed, but halfway through I heard myself adding details I didn't remember deciding to include. That scared me. Lies have a way of growing legs when you're not watching them. He pointed out inconsistencies I hadn't noticed. Small stuff. Nothing accusatory. Just enough to make my throat tighten. I laughed them off, made a joke about stress messing with memory. He smiled back, wrote something down. After he left, I sat alone in my car, hands on the steering wheel, realizing something important. I wasn't just afraid of being caught anymore. I was afraid of how easily I'd started believing my own story. That's when I understood this wasn't over. Not even close. The payout didn't come all at once. It arrived in stages, like the world easing me into the reward for what I'd done. First an advance. Then another call. Then a number so large it made my stomach flip when I saw it written out. I remember staring at my bank app, waiting for relief to wash over me. It didn't. The debt vanished on paper, but something else moved in to take its place. Every dollar felt tagged, radioactive. I spent carefully, almost reverently, as if drawing attention to the money might activate some hidden alarm. I avoided anything flashy. No upgrades. No celebrations. Just quiet transactions meant to make me look normal. Friends said I seemed lighter. More relaxed. One even joked that maybe the fire was a blessing in disguise. I laughed too hard at that. Later, alone, I felt sick. What surprised me most was how empty the victory felt. I'd imagined closure. An ending. Instead, I felt like I was living in the middle of a sentence that refused to finish. I got what I wanted. And somehow, that made everything worse. Time stretched in a strange way after that. Days were fine. Too fine. I went to work, ate meals, answered emails. Nights were a different story. Every sound outside my apartment felt like a rehearsal for something final. A car door. Footsteps. A knock that existed only in my head but still made my pulse spike. I kept replaying the night of the fire, hunting for mistakes. Did I leave something behind? Did someone see me hesitate too long? I started noticing cameras everywhere, on stores, on streetlights, on doorbells. They'd probably always been there, but now they felt personal, like they'd been installed just for me. I avoided the sight of the building. Took longer routes. Told myself it was about moving on, but really I was afraid the place would accuse me if I looked at it too long. Like it knew. There was no call from the police. No follow-up. No dramatic reveal. Just silence. And that silence was its own punishment. Because without consequences, there was nothing to push back against the thought that maybe I'd gotten away with it, and what that said about who I really was. Eventually, life did what it always does. It moved on without asking my permission. The investigation faded. Calls stopped coming. The fire became a footnote, then a memory other people barely remembered. I was never arrested. Never charged. On paper, I was just another unlucky owner who caught a bad break. That should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like being handed a mirror I couldn't put down. I noticed changes in myself first in small ways. How easily I justified things. How quickly I calculated risk versus reward in situations that didn't need calculating. I'd crossed the line once, and some part of me now knew it was possible. I stopped seeing myself as a good person who did a bad thing. That story didn't hold up anymore. I wasn't a monster either, which was almost worse. I was just capable. Capable of rationalizing harm if the pressure was right. That realization followed me everywhere. Into new projects. New relationships. Every decision carried an echo of that night. I didn't get punished by the system. I got something quieter. I had to live knowing exactly what I was willing to do, and that scared me more than prison ever did. I don't think there's a lesson here that fits on a motivational poster. I didn't hit rock bottom and bounce back wiser. I didn't win or lose. I just learned something about myself that I can't unlearn. People like to imagine crimes as moments, singular, explosive decisions. What I learned is that they're processes. Slippery slopes paved with justifications that feel reasonable when you're tired, scared, and convinced you're cornered. The fire wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how easy it became to explain it to myself. If you're reading this and you're in trouble, financial, emotional, whatever, here's my advice: pause longer than you think you need to. Talk to someone who won't benefit from agreeing with you. Because once you solve a problem by burning something down, even metaphorically, you don't get to pretend you don't know that option exists anymore. I got away with it in every way that counts legally. But I carry it. Every time I smell smoke. Every time I make a small compromise. Every time I tell myself a story to sleep at night. This isn't a confession for forgiveness. It's a warning from someone who learned too late that control is an illusion, and once you let go of it, you don't decide what burns.